The devastating Los Angeles fires captured the attention of the nation, if not the world. We watched neighborhoods disappear, families evacuate, and lives changed in a matter of hours, actually in matters of seconds. For many of us, the images were heartbreaking, but for others, they hit much closer to home. As someone who serves older adults and their families every day, I couldn't help but think about one important question. If an emergency happened tomorrow, would we be ready? We're not talking politics today. We're talking people. We're talking about our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors, and the people we love. And we're talking about what happens when lives change literally in an instant, and how we can better prepare ourselves and those we care about the most. My guest today is my dear friend, Michelle Boucher, happens to live in Maryland. She's a realtor, a senior home coach, and certainly an advocate for older adults and their families. But today, she's here for a much more personal reason. Michelle's parents, in their 80s and 90s, lost their home and nearly everything they owned in the Palisades Fire. In a matter of moments, decades of memories, possessions, and the place they called home was gone. Through experience, Michelle and her family learned powerful lessons about preparedness, resilience, family support, and what truly matters when everything changes. We're going to discuss the emotional impact of loss, and we're going to talk about the practical steps that families can take to prepare for emergencies, the role that technology and communication can take, and why preparation isn't about expecting the worst. It's about being ready to help the people we love when they need us the most. Because we can't control every emergency, but we can control how we prepare and how we respond. And just as I've often said, there are many things in life that we can't control, so we should control the things that we can. And this is a very important conversation. It may inspire you to take action. It may inspire you because of the heart of this story. But we definitely want to focus on what we can do, what we can learn from Michelle and her family, so that some of these things don't happen to us, and how we can help the world in the future. So let's get started. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Boucher to Always Ageless. Michelle, welcome.
Valerie, thank you so much. It is a privilege and an honor to be here and to be speaking to your audience. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. I've wanted to have you with us for a long time, and it seemed like there were other things happening in the world that maybe this wasn't the right time, but certainly I think that this is a time that people should hear from you. And I often wondered what it must have been like for what you've gone through. And so your story today, I'm going to want you to tell us about how, I think you weren't in California at the time, were you? You were in Maryland?
Yes. So to just sort of set the stage for a moment, I have two sisters, both younger, and we were all born and raised in Pacific Palisades back in the 60s. So I am a native Pacific Palisadian. In fact, my entire extended family had homes there. So it wasn't just my family's home, it was my extended family's home.
So tell us what happened the day of the fires.
Both my sisters and I now live on the East Coast. As we heard about the fires, you have to understand that when you grow up and live in California for any length of time, you sort of get used to the fact that there are fires, there are earthquakes, there are mudslides. So when something like this happens, which happens every year, you're really just listening for something that's a little different, like is it close to you, etc. We had never had a fire come close to us. That day, however, as we're watching on television what's going on, we realized that the genesis of the fire, the place it started, was literally across the street from one of my cousin's homes. When they started evacuating, we were hearing about it and watching it on the East Coast. But my parents' house, which was a little further away, there was no smoke. They didn't smell a fire. They didn't see anything. They didn't hear any sirens. So for them, they felt like they normally feel during a fire. So they were watching television. I think they're watching Judge Judy. And my sisters and I were calling every so often saying, the fire is really going crazy over there. Are you going to go? Are you going to leave? No, no, there's nothing around here happening. Well, finally, there was an evacuation order, and their caregiver, who was happened to be on duty that day, thank God,
Thank goodness.
Yvain was there with them. And I called Yvain. I said, Yvain, put him in the car and get him out, because there is an evacuation order. And while they don't necessarily see anything happening, it is happening around them.
So,
At that
Michelle,
time,
you could see the proximity of the fire more than they could see it.
right, because they weren't really watching much. I mean, they weren't obsessively watching like we were on the East Coast, right? They were living their lives. So my cousin, whose house was close to the origin of the fire, he drove down and he said, we're evacuating. My mother's sister, who's 94, also lived in the Palisades. She's evacuating. Yvonne, you need to get out. So it was right about the same time I made the phone call to Yvain. I said, get him in the car. So they did. So my father, who was 98 at the time, and mobility limited for sure, everything that comes with 98, and my mother got in Yvain's car and left. And I said to my mom, did you think about taking anything with you? And she said, no, we just thought we'd come back when it was all over, because there wasn't anything going on around them that signified that the fire was right close to them. So they got out and they drove to my father's brother's home a little ways away in Westwood, because they didn't have anywhere to go. And so they got there and they couldn't keep them. They didn't allow them to stay. So they left there and went to my niece's home.
So let me get this right. So your parents are leaving the fire, and first of all, could they have left without Yvain? If is that his name?
Yvain.
Yvain.
No,
Could they have
they
left
could not
without
have
them?
left. Not only could they not have left, they couldn't have called the fire department to help them because there was no one there. There were no fire trucks. The firefighters were way out in the hills trying to keep the fire from coming closer to the town. The problem
So by the time you got involved in it, it was almost too late. Nobody was going to come and save you.
Nobody was coming. And this is what my mother was I think she was just in shock. Couldn't believe that there was no one there. She was looking around and where are all the firefighters? Where are the trucks? Where's the water? Well, there was no water. The fire hydrant in front of our house had no water. And the winds, remember, I don't know if you do or not, but the winds that day were 80 to 100 miles an hour. There was some freakish winds. So it was picking up embers and moving them a mile away into the town, onto homes that had never come close to fire before. And that was why it was so out of control. Now they're in Westwood. They're trying to find a place to go. They couldn't stay at my father's brother's home. They wouldn't allow.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So they went to my niece's home, she has a 1-bedroom apartment in West LA. So there's 6 of them in this 1-bedroom apartment, or 5 of them in this 1-bedroom apartment with 2 cats. They got settled in for the evening, and as they watched the television, they saw that our neighborhood, our street, our home did not make it. And my mom said to me, I never ever thought we would not go home. So we didn't bring anything. She's lucky she took her purse. So they spent the night there in that tiny little apartment. I mean, imagine being 88 years old, 87 years old, and, living in the same home since she was 21. What you have to know about that house, and everybody's house has a lot of memories, but my mother, being an artist, was not just an artist, she was a ceramic artist. Uh-huh. And the entire home was full of her ceramic artwork, hand-painted art. The entire 2-car garage was full of greenware and 2 kilns. She taught classes out of her living room, which was an entire art studio. On the deck of her home, there were 4 tables where guests would come, and it was a paint-your-own ceramics place. You could bring wine. People had their birthday parties there, and she would host these painting parties. For years, she did this. The second story of the home was her pouring studio with about 1,000 molds and a pouring station and more kilns and a potter's wheel. Throughout the house, there were extraordinary pieces of art from Peter Max and from, private collections and things like that. So when I say it was an artist's home, it was to the brim full of art. And that was my mother's entire life.
It's almost like losing your family. I mean, right, for her, it was her life. It was her existence, was her art, I'm sure.
It was like losing her entire identity. My dad, he for the most part was just kind of taking it all in. At 98, there's not a whole lot he can really do except his heart was breaking, watching his wife and watching his house and his legacy evaporate. Layer on top of that, losing our entire town, which was our entire memory. We had to find them someplace to live. So we were able to eventually, after a hotel, secure an apartment. But then we had insurance to deal with. Here's lesson one for everybody. My mom's insurance policy had been canceled about 45 days prior without her knowledge because she underpaid her bill by 61 cents.
Oh no, you're kidding me.
She underpaid it she wrote the check out for 61 cents too little. And instead of giving her an additional bill or adding it onto the next bill, they terminated the policy.
And no phone call, nothing.
They were emailing. Okay, so here's lesson two. If you don't use email and your insurance company's trying to get a hold of you, this was Cal Fair Plan. So it's the state insurance.
Very fair.
Yeah. They only use email. They don't make phone calls. They don't send letters. They don't send letters. They didn't send her anything. So we didn't know the policy had been terminated. I have power of attorney, but when I tried to help her with the insurance, I had to get the insurance agent to call the owner of the insurance company, who happened to be good friends with the director of Cal Fair Plan, who called him at home that night and said, you need to reinstate this policy for these people. And he did. So the insurance ended up being reinstated, although it was not enough insurance. It was what we had. And better than nothing, because while I will say FEMA was phenomenal during that time.
So logistically, Michelle, so how does FEMA reach you? How do they know who you are?
Okay. So from the East Coast, we're all still on the East Coast, my sisters and I, we are calling and my mom is watching television and they're making statements about how to reach FEMA. And if you need help,
Okay.
here's the phone number. So we got on the phone, called them, gave them our information. They said, here are the hotels we pay for. Go there. It'll be paid for you. It was remarkable. There were some unsung heroes in this story that people probably don't hear about. The Army Corps of Engineers is another one. But, your natural reaction as a child is that you want to go there and help immediately.
Sure, of course.
We wanted to get on the first flight out. My youngest sister couldn't go. My middle sister ended up going. I couldn't go for almost 3 months because I had just been diagnosed with cancer. And so I was going through my treatment and surgeries during the fire and while we were trying to manage and handle all of these things that my mom and dad were going through. That for us was just an added layer of difficulty, which could have been, I guess, made easier had we had known that her insurance wasn't in place. Fortunately, the governor did a retroactive reinstatement of homeowners insurance. I think he went back 90 days prior to the fire. So anybody whose policy was canceled was reinstated and was covered, which was another one of those things you don't hear a lot of good things about some political people. And that was a lifesaver for a lot of us. But imagine how you would feel if you had written a check that was shy by a few cents and the devastating repercussions of that mistake, meaning that you had no insurance. I don't think anybody in their right mind would do that purposefully.
Sometimes you make little mistakes like that and there's just no way to recover them. And
we were able to work with our insurance company, who went to extraordinary lengths. They did whatever it took to help us. And, you know, Valerie, you don't think about the things that you wish you had in place until you need them in one of these types of emergencies.
No,
And,
you don't, do you? And what are those kind of things?
you know, my mother, who did have a computer, um, it burned. So what she didn't have was all her passwords and
Oh,
access. And so as I tried to help, I didn't have access to anything that any of our accounts, her accounts, or any of her credit cards or anything like that because we didn't know the passwords. And you know what happens when you try and reset a password, right?
yeah.
They send all these, you know, verifications and things like that. So what I have learned, the takeaway from that is if somebody is assigned power of attorney or has permission to help you, the access to what those documents are needs to be outside of your home because like so many people, guess what, everything was what, on paper.
Or the reset memos go to the email in the computer, which you
Yes,
no longer have access
which
to.
you no
And
longer
you
have
don't, and
access.
you can't take and you can't take, now some of us have our phones, in your parents' case, you can't get the reset message in your
Exactly.
computer.
That's why access was so important. Like if I had her password to her computer, to all her bank accounts, I could have gotten in on my computer and helped
Of
more.
course.
That's an important thing because everything burned, their wills, their trust, the deed to the house, my father's cremation papers, everything, you know, all the important documents that we are so proud of ourselves for keeping, you know, in order. And listen, if they're in a safe deposit box and no one can get to the key, you're in even worse shape.
It's
So,
something.
and
And
so
then, and what happens? Tell us what happens in a case like that. So you have things in a safe deposit box. And Michelle, just out of curiosity, then the bank is gone and the safe deposit box is gone. Then what happens? It's just gone.
it's just gone. And you know, my dad they had jewelry and valuables and all kinds of things in the home that they went back through the rubble to try to find. You can't find. I mean, it's almost impossible to find anything in a burnout. And not only that, it's toxic. So when a home burns like that, chromium 6 is released into the soil. And when the soil is disturbed, that chromium 6 goes into the air and it's very toxic to breathe. And it's one of the reasons why it took so long to get homes that did not burn rehabitable. My cousin spent out of pocket $700,000 to remediate his own home and $300,000 to remediate his mother's home because insurance wouldn't pay.
Yeah. And where do people get that money? You and I work with older people all the time. And I don't know really, Michelle, that it's any different for older people than it is for younger people. But when you lose everything, how do you start all over again?
Uh, so they're immediately homeless. Now,
Yes.
in our situation, we were able to get in some insurance reimbursement over the course of the ensuing 30 days, which was really amazing because a lot of people waited a lot longer. Once the policy was reinstated, we were able to get, you know, what insurance money there was. It looks like, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You start with the very, very basics. Do you have food? Do you have shelter? Do you have blankets? Do you have, you know, whatever it is you need to just be okay for a day or two or a week or so. Once they got an apartment, then we had to go get beds. We didn't have any beds, a couch, a table, a couple lamps, you know, some rugs, dishes. We had to buy. It literally was just like starting from nothing. You know, this is the thing. My mother has surprised all of us at her strength, her resiliency, her ability to hold it together, her ability to continue to care for my dad. And when they finally moved into the apartment that we had for them, the very first thing she did when she was able to get out and actually drive, because she did still drive, is she drove over to the art store.
I wondered if this story was going to come up.
and she bought herself a pad of
Ah,
paper and watercolors. And
so
she started
perfect.
painting, and she did not stop painting. And my mother's watercolor painting comes out of her like breathing, and it is spectacular. Would you like to see some things?
I would, and I'd like to ask you, did she paint anything different after the fire than she did before the fire, or was it always the same theme?
She painted flowers. Before the fire, she decorated her ceramic ware, a lot of floral, but just various designs. Um,
How long was it, Michelle, before they could go back to their house,
hmm.
to the site?
They moved out of the condo when my mom's sister was able to go back to her home in the Palisades, which was last November or December. So nearly a year they were in that condo. They moved back in with her sister, my dad, Yvain, and my mother, and they lived there for about, I'll say, about a month until they were able to find another home to rent very close to where our old home was. That our old home is still a vacant lot. So they're now renting another home right up the street because, again, this fire was so random. Some homes burned and some homes weren't touched. So they are now still in a temporary home. And here we are, what, 16 months out from the fire.
Mhm.
They decided to rebuild. We tried to get her to buy a house and just move in and be happy. No,
No, that's not what she wanted. No.
her words were, there's no place I want to be except Pacific Palisades. And my father had always told us he wanted to have his ashes buried under the oak tree that was on our property. Well, that oak
Oh,
tree burned. So my mom is determined to buy another oak tree and plant it so that my dad can be there. And so they are rebuilding at 88 and 99 years old. They're building a home, going through permitting and plans and architects. And
but after the fire, did they go back like in 2 days or 3 days or?
they had to wait until it was safe because, as I mentioned, it's highly toxic after a fire. And we did go back, I'm going to say maybe 2 months or so after the fire. Well, they wouldn't let you up there. There was a lot of looting going on, and they had cordoned off the Palisades until they could secure it. So people were coming over the hills and coming down into the neighborhoods and breaking into homes. And one of the things, I'll never forget this, one of the things that LA did was when they caught all these people, they put their names and pictures online for everybody to see who they were. So we had to wait until they secured the Palisades. Then you had to have ID and a permit to go back up there. So they were very limited in who they were allowing when. So we did finally go. And I do have some video of being there and what she did find. And one of the things she found was a broken piece of pottery that was a flower pot that had tipped over. And on the bottom of it, she had written happiness. And in the rubble, she found the remnants of happiness. Happiness is where you find it and
Yeah,
where
how
you want it to
touching.
be.
You were going to show us some of her paintings. Did you want to show us some now?
Yes, I'd love to. Can you hold on
I
for
know
just a
that our listeners can't see them, but we're going to
second?
put this on video and they can see them.
Okay. So this was one of the first paintings she sent to me.
Oh,
And I have one, two, three, four, five. I have 6 of these in my home, and they're all different. And then she started doing this. She started making cards out
oh,
of
how pretty.
out of her whatever this paper is that she uses. And she hand painted about 100 of these for me. And I use them as thank you cards for my clients because they're so incredibly precious. Every single one of them. I mean, I would keep and frame them all if I could. But the way my mom paints, it's just for a lot of people really beautiful. But for her, it's just like it's so easy, you know. When you're gifted like that, it just comes out of you. And I don't think she could make a mistake if she tried. So I'm
Oh,
very blessed to have her artwork because, you know, the pottery that she made, her house was full of the pottery that she made. And she lost all of it. And it's kind of silly, but just little coffee cups that my dad would use that she made,
mhm.
she didn't have those anymore. So my sisters and I, as we went out there, because we did start to cycle to go out there,
Sure.
and one of us is there usually every month.
Oh.
Um, we would bring pieces back to her that she had given to us. So she would have some of
Oh,
her original art.
how touching and how thoughtful of you to do that. And how kind and generous.
Well, my mother is extraordinarily kind and generous. When I got married, Valerie, I was the last of the three girls, even though I'm the oldest, to get married. And my mother, unbeknownst to me, had hand painted an entire china set for 12 people for my china. She handmade every single piece, and it's sitting right here in my home. And I don't like to use it because I don't want any of it to break or chip, but I
Of course
do
not.
occasionally. And she used to always say, "Oh, I'll just make another one. I'll just make another one. Just use it." Well, I will say that one of the things she did when she finally rented that condo was she bought herself a kiln.
She did.
And
She bought
she
one for
bought a
herself.
kiln. And I will just say that that was, I think, out of hope because she had to get her life back. She had to get her meaning back. She had to have a purpose again. And for her, painting and ceramic art is her purpose. Without that, she doesn't really have a reason, you know?
And how did you feel about that? You must have been so touched and so proud of her.
We were mad at her. We said,
You were?
"Mom, you can't have a kiln in an apartment. You can't. They're not going to let you. They're not
Oh,
going to let you fire anything in an apartment. This is it's a fire hazard of all things." So she went down and asked permission, and they let her do. It's a low fire kiln. If you know anything about kilns, it's
not
just a
much. I
regular,
don't know much.
yeah,
No.
regular 120 volt, like plugging in an iron. So they gave her permission to do this out on the deck. Well, that was
Oh,
all she needed, really. she, but we were like, "Are you kidding me? You're getting a kiln in an apartment that you don't know?" So she did. And I spoke with her the other day, and she was very excited because she had finally ordered a real kiln, one that she could begin firing again with. And she's going to be able to keep that outside of the house that they're in now. So she's preparing to move back. Instead of, you know, shopping for dishes and furniture like most people do when you buy a house, she's shopping for kilns first. So,
of course.
yeah.
Michelle, let me ask you, your dad is the oldest of the two, a little bit older. And some would say, although I try to not talk about people's age, but some people would say that that's a big challenge for him to deal with at the age that he is, at almost 100 years old, 99 years old. And many people are vibrant at that age. But how was that harder for him? Any harder for him? Or was it harder for him because he was just the man in the family? What did he go through that was different than what your mom dealt with?
Yeah, my dad is an amazing man. He's, his mind is as clear as 99 can be. He suffers from some medical conditions that make it very difficult for him to talk for long periods of time. He's in a lot of pain or distress most of the time, all day, every day. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
this was, I think, the hardest thing for my dad was that he lost the legacy he had built his whole life to leave to his children.
Which was his house.
was the house. You have to remember back in the 60s, Pacific Palisades it was a blue collar town. He made $30,000 a year. Most of the people we grew up with, we didn't know that we weren't rich, but we were maybe middle class, maybe. And it became this Hollywood town, in spite of itself, and became very, very expensive. Our home was a 2,500 square foot split level, 3-bedroom. Happened to be on the side of a canyon, beautiful location. And Zillow had it at 3.7 million before it burned. He built that house for, I think, $50,000, including the land. So for him, at a $30,000 blue collar job with no nothing more than a high school education and a few years in the Navy, he had become quite successful in a way that he could leave his children something, right? And he was proud of that.
Yes, I'm sure he was.
So I'm not saying that to brag, but I'm just saying that was really that for him, I think, was the biggest devastation. That, and seeing my mother go through what she had to go through to not only manage the house and all of that, but him, because caring for him, thank God we have you, Vane, but it is a full-time job, and it's an extraordinarily emotional job. And we know
Yes.
that a lot of families have that same challenge. So we feel for them too.
I know that you said you've spoke to your mom before this interview so that you could have her words in your mind, and you could really hear her talk about her personal experience and how she felt, maybe in a way that you haven't talked to her about it before. Would you like to tell our audience some things that she shared with you, and the things that you heard that were really most touching or that maybe were surprising?
Sure. My mother is not really, she doesn't speak about emotions easily or freely. She does talk about it, but that generation is called the silent generation for a reason, right?
Yes.
We're raised not to talk about it, don't speak about it, don't show it, don't cry, blah, blah, blah. But I did get out of her a few things. She realized that just because there was no sign of fire, it caused her to be, to not take it seriously, and because she didn't think that it was ever going to happen, she just kind of refused to get on board with the program, because we'd been asking her to get out of there for a while, and when I say a while, I mean hours, right? Because this all happened very fast. And I think for her, she was incredulous at the fact that she couldn't bring herself to believe that there would never be fire department or water or help or anyone. Nobody was doing anything that she could see. From our location, nobody was around. There weren't police officers. There wasn't anybody. So she just couldn't get over the fact that with a disaster like this, there was no one there to help them. The other thing that she shared with me was, she struggled a lot with some of the things she had to do for the insurance company and for the builder and for the contractors and zoning, because there's no written instructions anywhere. Everything is online. And if you aren't adept at online, managing things online, it's extraordinarily frustrating and very painful. It adds to the pain of the suffering that you're going through because you can't do something, because you don't understand how the computer works, or the way the software works, rather.
Yeah.
And
So
that,
frustrating. Yeah.
yeah, very frustrating. And then we try to help from a distance. And you're like, what are you seeing on the screen, Mom? Okay, what button do you see? I know that your listeners can relate to this, right?
Yes.
And it isn't just the silent generation. It's even me. I have that. That's why I had a kid,
They all
right?
have
So they could.
differently.
So for her, it was really very much about. She was just incredulous, and coming to grips with the reality of what was going on was extraordinarily difficult. And then having her own family turn them away in a time of crisis.
Oh,
So the fact that my dad's brother's wife would not let them stay there, she wouldn't let him stay. She told him to go find a hotel for reasons we still don't fully understand, but she did. Um, because the relationship was not impaired. I think it was a health issue that she was afraid that I don't know what. I could be speculating, but that turning away from family devastated them both and still does to this day. Devastated. So if you don't have somewhere to go that you know you'll be safe, I guess that's another one of the lessons is where you're going to go.
interestingly, with that question, I'm going to interrupt you a second because interesting with that comment is that we all talk about where will we go. We say, okay, well, we'll just go to our son's house. But what I'm hearing you say, Michelle, is that we need to have a conversation with those people and ask them. It sounds like if we have a situation like this, may we come to your home? Are we welcome? If you would rather not have us, we're making a plan. And now is when we thought we should discuss this with you, right? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, Valerie, you are so correct. Family dynamics isn't something you necessarily consider in the heat of the moment. You just
No,
hope that your family will be there for you in
you
an emergency.
expect them to be.
Say again?
You expect them to
Oh,
be.
you expect, yes, you
You
do. You
expect your
expect
family
them
will
to
be
be.
there.
Right.
I would never think of anything different. I could call you and ask you for help, and you're not my family.
Of course you could. Of course you could. Maybe it's easier because we're not family sometimes,
I don't
right?
know.
But
I
if
don't
you
know.
do have a family dynamic where there is some challenging, and we didn't even know that this was, sorry, we didn't even know that this was the case because the relationship had never been tested before like this.
Right.
Um, but that was probably as devastating as the fire was to be turned away by family in a crisis at night with nothing. I mean, thank God she had her purse. My dad didn't have his wallet. Everything was gone. So, uh, kind of an unexpected turn of events, for sure.
I can't imagine being in that situation and and that age at that stage of your life in that position and looking at each other like, where do we go? What do we do next?
Yeah.
Right.
I think my dad was heartbroken.
Oh, I'm sure he was. Yeah, I'm sure he was.
I mean, that's the word that comes to mind for me. We were
Michelle,
angry.
here's something that might surprise our listeners, and certainly it surprised me, is at the emergency shelters set up in Los Angeles, 3/4 of the people on those cots were seniors. Why are older adults consistently the most displaced, the most forgotten, and the most unprepared? And you and I work with this population every day. Whose responsibility is it to change that? What can we do to make a difference?
Yes. And it's situations like these crises that force you to answer that question. Because I think until you have to, a lot of people just don't. I think it's human nature. Um, I think, like you said, there's an assumption that family will be there for you if you're lucky enough to have that. We tried to get my parents to move to the East Coast because that's where their kids are. But we now know when my mother says, I'm never leaving the Palisades, that's what she means.
Yes, sounds like it.
Yeah. So, uh, I think that your question is a very poignant one and a very important one. And I think the work that you do and the work that I do um,
Okay.
are working towards answering those questions and to make sure that our seniors are well cared for and that people pay attention to them.
We talk about the go bag, and let's just describe, I'll let you describe to our listeners exactly what that means. And we think we should have one. And so I'm asking you now, Michelle, is that really the thing that people should have? Is there now, having lived through this experience, is there something that should be a part of that that we hadn't considered before? Is there something like passwords that people should maybe do first or make more important than some of the things in the go bag? Talk about that.
Yes, and when I say go bag, I'm going to use that metaphorically because to have a physical bag is fine if you want to do that. But really, what's more important is that if you do not have a power of attorney, a will, a healthcare directive, run, don't walk to your nearest attorney and get that done. Because nobody can help you if they don't have authority or permission when it comes to accessing things. Because if you can't communicate, if you're in a position where you can't talk, you can't make your wishes known, somebody's going to have to make those decisions for you. So in a quote unquote go bag, what I would suggest is this: all your passwords, and look, that's a big bite, right? If I had to give you a list of all of my passwords, I would just say, Google, tell me what all my passwords are because I don't remember them all. So I keep them simple. Everybody has their methodology. But at least to your bank accounts, your insurance, your automobile information. They lost both of their cars. So just,
Oh,
things that are important to you, know where they are and let somebody else know where they are and make a copy of them outside of your home. Give it to somebody that you trust, whether it's a neighbor or even if it is a bank vault or a what do you call those?
safe
Safety
deposit box.
deposit boxes. Yep. Because look, most banks don't burn. This was an extraordinary circumstance. I understand that. But somebody's got to know where it is and somebody has to be able to get to it. The other thing you need to have in there is the names of people that need to know where you are and what's happening, like your doctors, right? Your children, your relatives, your spouse if they don't live with you. Your medications need to be identified in there. And so that if somebody comes and finds you on the floor during one of these crises, they at least have something like, we talk about the file of life that you can put up on your refrigerator, which is a wonderful idea. But anything that can identify anything about you that will help them save your life or help you needs to be in this go bag. If you want to do a physical bag, then kind of the obvious things, right? A change of clothes, some cash. Make sure you have cash. Um, the names and phone numbers of important people that you need to contact, bank accounts or bank numbers. Imagine your phone is gone and imagine your computer is gone. So if you let yourself think about that a minute, Valerie, what does your life look like if you have no phone and no computer?
I would be in big trouble.
I think we all would be.
But something that I'm hearing from you is that we talk about, okay, and we've all been through this. Okay, well, I'm going to I'll put my passports in my desk drawer. Okay, we have that at our house. Yeah, they're in my husband's desk drawer. Or we have them here. That's not good enough. We need to have them with Michelle on the other side of the country, right? Because
Or
if
at
something
least
happens
a
here,
copy. Sure. Send me a picture of your passport number and your ID. Just something so that I can help. Right. When we had to get copies of their trust and will and all the documents we lost, the attorneys are dead. The notary's dead. Their secretaries are gone. These things were done many years ago. So,
and not all of them are digital
oh
because they were
no,
older, done years ago.
that's right. That's right. And that's another layer of challenge, right? So if you have your documents on paper, which so many people still do, um, you must put a date in your calendar to have them digitized, whether you do it or have somebody else come do it for you. Because if that paper happens to go away, or if you're gone and no one knows where that paper is, that's a real problem. So it doesn't take a long time. And you could take pictures of it for crying out loud and just send the pictures or have somebody else take pictures with their phone of all your documents, store it in the cloud and make sure somebody has access. That's the easiest way. It doesn't cost any money.
Let's talk about neighbors. We've heard a couple of stories about people in the Palisades who were in their backyard, had no idea there was a fire going on,
Yeah.
and had a neighbor not known. In fact, one story we've heard is that a neighbor knew to call the gentleman's son and said, "There's a fire here. We don't see your dad." And he said, "Oh, dad's in the backyard." Had the neighbors not known the son's phone number and called the son and said, "Where is your dad?" that dad would probably not be alive. So the all of this connection with people is far beyond what we've thought about before, is it not? Did your parents, now maybe because your parents lived in that neighborhood so long, everybody knew each other,
They did.
and that's not the case so much anymore?
One of the nice things about growing up in a neighborhood like that is that you're right. Everybody knows each other. My mom's neighbors had also gotten out, but I don't think they checked on each other. I think it was sort of, you did what you did for your own, for your own purpose, because
Mhm.
our home actually is set back from the regular street, and it's behind a couple other homes. So only a few folks kind of really go back there.
Mhm.
But to your point, the gentleman in the backyard who was out watering his garden and didn't know there was a fire, that's exactly how my parents felt. It wasn't around. This was an extraordinary circumstance, but having neighbors know your information is so key. And you and I sell houses. And one of the things that I do when I close on a house is I tell my clients, because I'm not going to be presumptive and go next door, but I would tell my clients, go knock on your neighbor's door and introduce yourself. Here's a bottle of wine you can take over there with you. So that there's a reason for somebody to connect. And I remember that when we moved here from California in 2000, all those years ago, the very first knock at the door that I got was from my next door neighbor with a bottle of champagne that said,
I know.
hey, we're here, we're next door, and we'd love to have you for dinner.
How
And
nice.
had anything happened to us, they would have all the information they needed to help us out. So you're right, Valerie, and thank you for pointing that out.
You are one of three children, correct?
Yeah.
Did you all handle this the same? Did your siblings react to this and deal with it differently than you did?
We all did, in that we were all trying to help. We all took turns going out there. It was too much. You can't all be there at one time. It's too much. But we have, over the past 16 months, each one of us has been there almost every month. One of us is out there. We all contribute differently to how we help. Um, my youngest sister is very good with, she did all the architectural drawings of the new home. She's very good with computer stuff, with helping my mom get back online because we did get her a new computer. Um, my middle sister was helping to try to find a home. And, she's out there helping getting the house in order and shopping and making sure they have everything they need. My role is more of I'll say a corporate role, if you will, making sure that all the paperwork is in order, making the phone calls to the banks and transferring money and talking to the insurance company and, negotiating with the real estate people that are dealing with her build. And, so we all sort of fell into our roles, but we all handled it, I think, a little differently. The three of us, it's still really painful to, I mean, we're still grieving, really. Um,
And that's
so,
probably a good lesson, Michelle, for the work that we do with older adults and their families, is when families get together to talk about, look, we all have different capabilities. Okay, my sister is a great medical advocate. If we're going to the hospital, I want Susan there with me. I don't even need to worry. She'll take care of everything in the
yeah,
hospital. And I have, a younger brother who's just, I'm so close to. I just want him to talk to me. I just want to know he's there talking to me.
yeah,
And so in your case, and with our families, it seems that this is a good thing to talk about in advance, isn't it? If we have an emergency, you do this, and I'll do that.
it is. And, getting those conversations started can be very challenging. And we often say that holidays are a good time when everyone's around the table to try
We
to
do,
bring
don't we?
things up. Yeah. My sister, my middle sister, is the one like yours, that if you are in the hospital, oh my gosh, they used to call her the boss. She was so bossy with all of the, when my dad was going through some medical things and he was in the hospital, she was so bossy. And my mom appreciated it because she got stuff done, you know,
Yeah.
so you leverage their talents, definitely. Yeah.
We have enjoyed having you, and we went a little longer because we're going to continue this and continue this episode. And I want to have you come back, and we've got another situation that you and I talked about. I'd like to have another interview with you just to talk about that separately. And I wondered what advice you've given us some advice today. If if you could give some advice to our viewers and our listeners in California, we certainly know about fires. We have earthquakes, but things happen. Sometimes we have storms, not very many, but we do.
Yes.
Not as much as on the East Coast. So, what is your advice to these people if they should go out this week and do three things? What would that be?
So I would say think about it in these terms: information, answers, and a plan.
All right.
Information, answers, and a plan. And so make sure that you have all the information about the most important documents and the most important things in your world, and give those answers to somebody who can help you. Okay. If you don't know, or you aren't sure about what you need, now is the time, because a crisis is a horrible time to make decisions. And it is much harder to get information. And that is the one thing that we really struggled with, especially with the insurance company up front. Double check your policies. Make sure that they are covering you enough, because we were not covered enough. We didn't have enough coverage to replace what we had. And B, that that they're actually in force. If something has lapsed, you may have missed that email, or even if it came in the mail, you may not have opened it. Just double check those things. And then finally, just have a plan, even if it's just verbal. Have a plan of what you would do if something happened and you had to either leave your home or you could not communicate. So that somebody, and just go knock on your neighbor's door if you have to. I hope that, people that feel like they can still do that. Somebody knows where you are and how to reach someone you love, so that if you need help, you can get it and they can help you.
And so that even if you can't speak to that person because you've had a conversation, you can say, I know that person would have wanted me to do it this way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Michelle, thank you so much. You've become a good friend, and a good friend to older people, and certainly in the area where you are, you're an inspiration to so many of us. And thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for sharing your parents' story. We're so sorry that they had to go through this, and that there's so many other people who had to deal with this. And we're going to have you come back and talk again about some other related issues. Thank you for being at Always Ageless. And we're so appreciative. Thank you also to your parents for allowing you to share their story with us. And we wish them only the best when they get in their new house. We'll send a nice housewarming present for them.
Well, Valerie, I want to come back with a picture of their new home when that time comes, sometime this year, whenever
Please
that is.
do. And for people who are going to see this on YouTube, I just want to tell them that we're going to have some pictures of Michelle's family's house before the fire and after the fire. So if you'd like to hear the rest of the story, it will be on YouTube. Thank you very much. And thank you for being with Always Ageless, to our listeners and our viewers, and come back again next week.
Thank you so
Bye.
much, Valerie, for having me. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.